Jeep is back in the 7-seat SUV game with this, the new Grand Cherokee. And this is the L specification. So you've got room for 7 there on 3 rows, and this is a longer wheelbase. And frankly, it's a big vehicle overall. It's also very important for Jeep to get this car right in Australia. Normally, when we get a new vehicle like this, we like to take it out in the bush somewhere nice and pretty to show it off and see what it can do. But we are currently in the middle of a big downpour in Australia. So we are here at Australian Detailing Services in Mona Vale. These guys are very busy putting PPF, paint protection film, on some very fancy and expensive looking cars in the background here. They are apparently very good at doing that, but they've graciously given us a little bit of room here so we can shoot some video out of the rain. It's very much appreciated. But back to this Jeep. Now, like I said, this is a very important vehicle for Jeep to get right in Australia, and there is a lot to talk about with this new model. It's an all-new platform. There's a lot of new technology going on. That interior, frankly, is very impressive in this Summit Reserve specification, but at the same time, it's not all perfect. So I want to run you through everything you need to know about this Jeep Grand Cherokee today if you're in the market for a big 7-seat SUV. Let's get stuck into it. This is the first new Jeep Grand Cherokee in a decade, and it replaces the WK2 model with something all new. This Grand Cherokee is built atop a new platform, which is actually derived from Alfa Romeo's Giorgio platform. That's actually used on the Stelvio and the Giulia. This new Jeep will come in 2 sizes. There's a 5-seat model which will soon arrive in Australia, but we've got the 7-seat L variant. That measures in at 5.2 meters long. The new Grand Cherokee range starts at $82,250 for the Night Eagle specification, but we've got top spec here. It's called Summit Reserve, and it is priced from $115,450 before on-road costs. This spec is loaded with lots of equipment. Heated advented first and second rows, leather seats, massaging seats up front, and there's also a low-range transfer case, 360-degree camera system, and 21-inch wheels, along with that premium interior treatment. Common across the range is a solitary choice of powertrain. That's Jeep's long-serving 3.6-litre Pentastar, naturally aspirated petrol V6. It makes 210 kilowatts and 344 newton meters, running through an 8-speed automatic transmission. There is no diesel powertrain coming for the Grand Cherokee, but a plug-in hybrid is on the horizon. In comparison to the previous generation Grand Cherokee, this one's towing capacity has been reduced. We're looking at 2,268 kilos for the Summit Reserve we have here. Against a claimed combined fuel economy of 10.6 litres per 100 kilometres, we've used 13 flat on average during our week with the car. Like I said in the intro, the interior of this car is very impressive, and Jeep spent a lot of time and effort talking about the effort that they went into making this as premium as possible, and you really can see it in here. There's a few details I'd like to point out in here. This is genuine wood, and it kind of runs across the whole dashboard here. It's up on the doors, and it's in the doors of the second row as well. So there's good detail across the board. The seats, they're comfortable and they look impressive. They've got pleating and perforations. These are heated and ventilated in this specification. Very comfortable for day-to-day driving. And in terms of overall practicality, this is pretty good. There's a lidded compartment here. You've got your cup holders in there. There's room for bottles in the doors, and you've got a wireless phone charger here. This actually does have wireless CarPlay and Android Auto, a couple along with USB-C outputs. There's a 12 volt there as well. So this is a very modern, very technological interior, which feels very up to date. But at the same time, I do like to see lots of buttons here for things like air conditioning controls. It makes life pretty easy for everyday usage. So you've got air conditioning along here. These are your buttons for your heated seats and all those sorts of things. The infotainment has a lot of stuff going on in there. I'll run you through a little bit of that stuff later. And also, one thing to note here, you've got buttons on the front of the steering wheel, but a classic little Jeep trick, you've also got ones on the back here, and you can use those to adjust volume and flick through different radio stations and tracks, so you might not notice that they're there on first impressions. But overall, this interior, very impressive. The infotainment display here measures in at 10.1 inches, and it uses Jeep's Uconnect 5 operating system. It's got wireless Apple CarPlay and wireless Android Auto, digital radio and navigation. And I've got to say, after using it for a bit, it's easy to navigate through the different functions. And we do like the fan cam mode as well, which can help you gather evidence of troublemakers in the back. If you're buying a vehicle of this size, chances are you've got kids or a growing family. And as you can see here, I've been using this car for the daycare duties for the last few days, and it's been working really well. The kids love it. Obviously, there's a lot of space here. There's a nice big sunroof, which is standard in this specification. And if they do get a little bit dozy, I do like the sun blinds. That is another standard thing in this Summit Reserve spec, but I do want to show you what it's like with an adult in there as well, because space, things like legroom, things like headroom, that is all important stuff. So let's have a look. So the baby seats are out and I'm into the second row of this Grand Cherokee. First thing to talk about is space overall. That's my driving position up front there, and as you can see, there's still a fair amount of legroom on offer, and even though there is a sunroof here, headroom is fantastic also. Now these seats are quite good. They've got a 60-40 split on them. As you can see there, it slides forward and backwards. That's handy for the third row, which I will get to later. And also they do have a tilt function, so you can go sort of full Rancho Relaxo mode if you want to have a nap or something like that. Don't forget, you do have those awesome sunshades. This Summit Reserve is quite well spec'd in terms of features. So we've got heated and vented seats in the second row. That is a little bit of a rarity. You've got USB and USB-C power outlets and even a household plug, a couple of air vents, there are storage hooks, all sorts of things, and a very nice finish overall, I have to say. Sometimes a luxury car will be really luxury up front and then this experience kind of softens as you go further back, but that is not the case here. You've still got the nice perforations, the pleatings, the speaker covers are really nice, and like I said before, that wood finish. So in the back here, it does feel quite luxury. Before I jump into the third row, I just want to show you also the size of the boot in 7-seat mode here. That third row obviously does eat into a little bit of room, but honestly, this is not too bad, and it's better than most other 7-seaters. Quite often they encroach a long way into the boot space and you might only have 100 or 150 litres, something like that. But this is still quite usable. You could fit in things like groceries, even a few larger bags. I'll just grab this bag here to show you. I'll fit that in long ways like that. That boot will close nice and easily, even with that decent sized bag in there. So I reckon that's pretty good. Here's the third row of the Grand Cherokee, and it's very good. I'm going to keep that part of the second row up and out of the way so you can see what's going on here. But this seat here, as you can see, my legroom is very good. I have cinched that forward a little bit just to free up a bit of space in this third row, but I've got a lot of room here and someone in the second row would still have enough leg room as well. Headroom is fantastic. They've kind of scalloped out the roof here a little bit, so that's good. And this is a genuinely comfortable place to be. I've got a decent window here. I've got an air vent, I've got somewhere to put my drink, and even a couple of USB power outlets there. So you're really not missing out on a whole lot in here. And this is a genuinely good 7-seat option. This Grand Cherokee L is a big car, and you do get a bit of a sense of that when you're driving it. It's on a long wheelbase overall, but once you get used to the dimensions, it's not too bad. You're not going to be fitting this thing into small car parks. Obviously, it's just too large of a vehicle. But when you are trying to squeeze it into some smaller spaces, the camera system does work quite well. It's a good quality system. You've got a nice 360-degree camera get up going on there, so that does help you when you're trying to figure out what's going on. It's good, but not necessarily very good. And in comparison to the competitors out there that have turbocharged options, more power, more torque, and to be honest, more efficiency, this does feel a little bit lacking in that regard. The major problem with it is that there isn't a lot of torque available below 3,000 RPM, so the engine does have to rev along to get moving. It's actually covered by the gearbox quite well. This is a TorqueFlite 8-speed torque converter automatic gearbox, and it does a lot of work to shift the ratios around, and it's fairly smooth and unobtrusive when it does it, but it's kind of covering a flaw, I suppose, and that flaw is still there. And the simple fact is this engine just doesn't offer enough torque, especially in the lower rev range, to suit this car and the kind of around town driving that it normally does. Next thing to talk about is ride and refinement. Because this car has picked up bones borrowed from Alfa Romeo, this uses a stretched and widened Giorgio platform as the base. So that means this does share a little bit of DNA with the likes of a Giulia and a Stelvio. You might not realize when you look at it at a Jeep. But it makes a car that is much more car-like to drive overall, and it's quite a refined experience around town. Suspension is good, even on these large alloy wheels that we've got on this Summit Reserve model here. It does get a little bit crashy on some minor imperfections around town, things like manhole covers, speed bumps, that sort of thing. You do get a little bit of chatter from the suspension and a little bit of movement translating into the cabin as well. It's not as refined, it's not as comfortable as something like an Audi Q7, but at the same time, it is really quite good. This powertrain might be lacking a bit of torque, yes, but it is smooth and quiet, and the steering feel is quite bang on. This is an easy car to drive once you get your head around the dimensions of it. This Jeep is loaded up with a fair amount of active driving technology as well. Things like adaptive cruise control, lane keep assistance. It also has a kind of semi-autonomous lane centering technology as well. I have found that it's all quite good. It doesn't get too obtrusive. When we were driving around in all of that heavy rain earlier on, the lane keep assistance did throw a wobbly a couple of times, thinking I was about to leave the lane when I clearly wasn't, but I have to caveat that because we were driving in some pretty heavy rain there for a bit, so I think I'll give it a pass on that front. But mostly all of that technology does stay out of the way of general everyday driving. I think that's an important thing. It's there to save you in case you do have a little of a lapse of concentration or something like that, but at the same time, it doesn't get in the way and feel like you have to turn it off just to drive the car normally. The weather has turned in Sydney. It's now a beautiful day, and our time with this Grand Cherokee L is coming to an end. And a penny for my thoughts, I suppose. The one thing I don't like about this car mostly is the powertrain. This 3.6 litre petrol V6, it's good enough, but it's not necessarily what I would call good. And this car would be a lot better if it had a little bit more torque available, especially in the lower rev ranges. I'm thinking something like a turbocharged petrol, a turbocharged diesel, even a hybrid that can help cover that gap of torque in the lower revs would go a long way. And it would probably make this car a little bit more efficient as well, which is always a good idea. But aside from that, there is a lot to like about this car. If you want a genuine 7-seat large SUV, this thing is big and it is genuinely comfortable from front to back. And in this Summit Reserve model, it's actually quite luxurious as well. There's a lot of spec going on here, so you could argue this is good value for money in comparison to other large luxury SUVs, but it's spacious, it's comfy, and it's well spec'd. So if you want a car for your big family, your growing family, and you do want that little bit of a touch of premium, this thing is worth a look. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Let us know in the comments below. Do you think this Grand Cherokee L is on the money for Jeep in Australia, or would you be looking at something else? And of course, hit that thumbs up button for us and head over to Drive.com.au because you can read the full review over there.